In 2024, Nigeria received over $20 billion in remittance inflows. Remittance is, by definition, a sum of money transferred either as a gift or payment to another party or person. If you check the CBN's website, it lists some things as our secondary income. In that secondary income, there's something called official developmental assistance and personal transfers to Nigeria. Then there's personal transfers in form of workers' remittance from migrants. So think people who traveled abroad from Nigeria to go and work there, sending money back home. Workers abroad sent $20 billion into Nigeria just last year. Remittances. For context, crude oil, Nigeria's #1 foreign exchange earner, was around $36.85 billion. This makes personal transfers from migrants or remittances, that $20.98 billion, the second highest item that brings dollars into Nigeria. The third item is portfolio investment inflows. So think buying Nigerian shares, buying Nigerian government bonds, and short-term funds. That is $13.35 billion. It's less than remittances, and other things like gas exports and more make up the other numbers. Today, we'll focus on item number 2. $20 billion in foreign exchange to Nigeria could just flip with the latest bill signed into law by the US. In 2022, the estimate was that the US was responsible for almost 30% of remittances that came into Nigeria. So imagine almost $6 billion out of $20 billion. But that's if we keep all things equal. But we can't know for sure yet. Starting in 2026, all transactions that are funded by physical instruments like cash, checks, or money orders from the US will now include a 1% tax. In this video, we'll break down everything you need to know about this bill and how it affects us. Without further ado, here's why people now have to pay 1% tax on every remittance dollar they send to Nigeria from the US. Let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill, the HR1. Also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. It is the latest effort by the US government to maximize its monetary position. Section 70604 of the bill states that the US tax code will now add a 1% tax on remittance transfers. In simple terms, every remittance transfer that is sent outside the US by an individual will receive a 1% tax on it. With that definition alone, you can understand why it is worth paying attention to, especially considering how much these remittances contribute to the economy. But more on that later in the video. The percentage was originally set at 5%, however, it went through revisions and brought down to 3.5% before finally settling at 1%. The bill states that it's an excise tax that is imposed on the sender of the remittance transfer. It also states that it only applies to remittance transfers for which the sender provides cash, a money order, so think Western Union and the likes, or cashier's check. You get the idea. The document only shows 2 cases where this tax will not be charged. The first is if the funds are withdrawn from an account held at a certain financial institution. Secondly, if the transfer is funded with a debit card or credit card issued in the United States. In summary, non-United States citizens and international students who may be sending money back to their home countries or paying for services in other countries are now subject to paying this 1% tax. Now, while 1% doesn't sound like a lot, it's 1%, its impact is a lot larger than it looks. For all this to make sense, let's attach numbers to the expectations that I've made so far. A 1% tax means that a sender will now pay an extra penny per dollar. So if you're sending $400 back to your family in Nigeria, you would have to pay an extra $4 in tax to the US Treasury. So if you're sending cash. If it is a monthly spend, then that comes down to $48 a year in taxes alone, and it will increase or decrease depending on just how much money you are sending back home. So yes, it is the sender that pays. The remittance provider collects that 1% and must withhold it and remit this tax to the US Treasury. Just as a brief highlight, if the original plan for 5% tax had gone through, that same $400 transfer would cost you $20 in tax. But beyond a singular transfer and the household or on a larger scale, there are larger consequences. Analysts believe that if the US had imposed the original 5% tax, it would have affected sub-Saharan Africa by as much as a whopping $2.8 billion. It would have posed a major problem for countries in the regions that relied heavily on remittances for foreign exchange. Most African countries and families depend on these remittances for education, healthcare, investments, and other well-being expenses. This tax would potentially have an adverse effect on regions that are already in a not so great position with inflation and decline in foreign direct investments. We saw that number earlier. It is worth noting, however, that the tax coming down to 1% Thankfully, the loss will be about 1/5 of the $2.8 billion that I quoted earlier. It's still a lot of money, and even worse for the real people who depend on these remittances. But I want to leave something that is worse for something that is much better, and that is Onboard. I've been using this app for many months now, and it's probably one of the best ways to do remittances. You can create a US bank account straight from here, from your phone, and you can fund that account via stable coins like USDT, and even receive USD via ACH or wire transfer straight to your wallet. You can withdraw right to Naira straight to your bank account. They also give you a virtual dollar card to pay for online subscriptions even. Download the app with my link below and use this code to let them know I sent you, and make sure to transact at least $100. Shout out to Onboard for this, and let's get back to the video. Well, this part is pretty straightforward. Nigeria's economy is heavily reliant on remittances from citizens in the diaspora. In 2024 alone, Nigeria received more than $20 billion in remittance inflows, as we mentioned. That is several times more than any foreign direct investment we received within the same period. Yes, we have to acknowledge that the figure also accounts for remittances made from other countries over the world. Still though, apart from the fact that these transactions are done in dollars, the US has the largest economy in the world, and as we mentioned, it likely accounts for a good portion of that number, most likely around 30% or maybe less. Out of the 46.2 million immigrants that live in the United States, sub-Saharan Africans account for more than 5% of that population. That means tens of thousands of Nigerians and the households that they support back in the country may now be affected. But beyond the social consequences, there are also economic consequences. Remittances are one of the few stable sources of foreign exchange that Nigeria already has access to. Anything that affects that inflow may also affect the economy, and it may further weaken the Naira that finally managed to find stability over the last few months, and it may also increase the cost of imports. As of right now, there's not much we can do except to observe and prepare for when the new policy will go into effect. It doesn't look like the US government is going to back down on this or on its goals with this bill, so it may be one of those things that we learn to live with. On a larger scale, it may be the best time for Nigerian authorities to find new ways to boost other forms of foreign investment to keep the Naira and the economy in a relatively healthy position. Do you send or receive money from the diaspora, and are you going to be affected by this new bill? Do you think that the US Congress will change their stance on this? Leave a comment with your thoughts below, and speaking of taxes, check out this video where we explain everything that you need to know about taxes in Nigeria and Nigeria's new tax reform bill. I'll see you guys in that video.